My grandmother lived for more than 25 years as a widow. She was certainly accorded both respect and courtesy by both family and all of her neighbors. All looked out for her. My aunt calling her, in fact, daily, just living across town, but called her every day to inquire after her day and her needs. She would do so until my grandmother died at 94, living on that same block in that same house for nearly 60 years. Yet, in ancient society, and also even into our own past century, the widow did not have rights to the husband's estate and inheritance. She did not have adequate recourse laid out in the law. I had more than one widow who got that fateful phone call. Did you receive your husband's pension check? Send it back. It ain't yours. And I had more than one widow that had to sell the house and move into an apartment because when the pension ceased, there was just not enough. We know that for in our own nation after 1935, only a reduced security check, oftentimes coming out of the Depression, very little, if any, savings. And sometimes, if we're lucky, familial generosity would be all that would remain for the widow's subsistence. Such would be the plight of the Hebrew widow in the ancient Near East. Listen to the words that describe widowhood. In Hebrew, almana, which means literally unable to speak, to be voiceless. The Aramaic word that would be used in the time of Jesus was to be in pain. In the Greek, the word refers to being forsaken or being left out. All this points to a dismal existence where the widow's rights literally would die with her husband. Her children also were bereft, as the widow's children would be described as orphans, abandoned by all. Thus we hear in the scriptures that repeated phrase, the widow, the orphan, and the stranger. These were the poorest of Elijah's day. And it seems perhaps this has not changed so much in our own time, especially as the stranger continues to be in that subservient, at best second-class position. We heard last week the beginnings of the prophet Elijah's journey. The great prophet Elijah, second only to Moses. We heard how he has had harsh, accusatory words to be said against King Ahab of the northern kingdom. King Ahab has forgotten, has abandoned Yahweh for the sake of all the other gods in the region. King Ahab, he has heard from Elijah. He will continue to hear from Elijah. But now he's being hounded and pursued, all out of revenge. So the divine spirit drives Elijah out of the kingdom into a foreign land that he might be safe. He comes to the widow's house. He comes as a stranger, he to her, her to him. He is physically and emotionally and perhaps even spiritually exhausted. Along with the journey, he is hungry, he is thirsty, and she is likewise. She is ready to take that small measure of meal that is left at the bottom of the barrel, to bake it and to share it, and then to slowly die of starvation, cradling her son in her arms. But beyond the lack of food, Her craving is for a voice that can be heard, for someone's hand to reach out and restore her to a fuller life. Notice that she even lacks a name in this narrative. She is indeed a nobody, one who is unworthy of justice or any measure of kindness. But Elijah, the stranger, one to the other, would be the one to reach out to her and lift her up. And then, even as his own faith in God, the Holy Creator, would be severely shaken by that same widow who would rail at him and rail at his God for making her son sick and to have him die. But Elijah will not leave her alone, will not leave his God alone. And the life of the child came back to him again, and he is revived. The widow, the orphan, the stranger, all are really familiar to us today. How many folks, some of us maybe, or someone that we know, feels lost and hopeless, hungry, thirsty for more than just the stuff that we are so tempted to accumulate in our lives. For those who are eager for more than the mere scraps of love or care or kindness. How many people live in emotional and spiritual poverty in our world? Widows become the metaphor for spiritual and emotional poverty that is in fact universal. Are we not all poor before God? We don't like to think that. Oh no, we have a lot. We have a lot stored up. I've been faithful, God. I've been a good person. Oh, I got a whole lot in the spiritual bank. Not in the presence of God. Are we not all needy, widowed, orphaned, a stranger in spirit? What does it say about our future generation when, for example, we look at statistics that clearly point to a rise in teenage suicide? Teenage. Are the stresses of now any different than those that were placed upon that widow and her young son? Do they feel anything different than what we feel, sometimes being in that such a deep distress that we become hopeless? And yet, despite it all, we place our trust in one another and in the God of eternal care, and the God who leads us to say the truth. The truth is described in the psalm that we just recited just a few minutes ago. Praise the Lord, O my soul. I will praise the Lord as long as I live. The Lord who executes justice for the oppressed, who gives food to the hungry, who watches over strangers, who upholds the orphan and the widow. We must first acknowledge ourselves to be poor. And only then will we know the joy of the God who remains on the side of the poor. Elijah's widow has known the bounty of God's presence through the prophet. And she has known the motherly grief of her own son's death, and realizes that hope has also died with him. But Elijah hears her cry once again, and covers her son's body with his own, symbolizing God's sustaining love and care for the whole person. And hope and life is revived again. Today we stand as that voiceless widow. We are the homeless orphan. We are the stranger adrift in life. We are the poor, wayfaring alien. We die many deaths. And God covers us with life anew. And surprise, we are Elijah. We become the voice that will not be stilled, will not be silenced, as prisons are overpopulated and the death sentence is resurrected once again, all to make us safe. we become the voice that will not deny, that will not denigrate, but will speak well of the stranger who only wants to escape a land of oppression and violence for a land of hope. In God's name, we are Elijah, the one who brings refreshing water, reviving oil, sacred bread and wine to the lost, the poor, the forgotten. Surprised by joy, we too receive life, not just from God, but from those to whom we minister. For as the scriptures remind us, God promises that when we receive the stranger and the poor, we may be receiving angels without knowing it. We first must know ourselves to be the real poor. And in that acceptance, we will discover the God who is always on the side of the poor.